Ready when you are, guys.
Okay. Cheers, Matt, for doing this. I suppose to kind of kick off, you've obviously on record as saying what an influence private play in particular was on you at an early point in your career. I suppose, could you just tell us a bit about what you were doing at that time and why it was such an influence?
So what year did Private Plane come? Was it 78?
78.
That's what. Yeah. So 78. I would have been about 16, I suppose. So in 1977, I was working. My first job as a 15-year-old was in a recording studio in the West End of London. And around about that time, I started to go to a lot of gigs. I was working in Soho. There was this whole world opened up for me. I wasn't a fan of punk, but the post-punk world is what interests me because I've been influenced by, for instance, the more experimental side of the Beatles, like Revolution No. 9 particularly was something that fascinated me. And playing around with tape recorders. You know, I'd had bands from the age of 11, but then when my little band had split up, so when I was about 15, I started to mess around with tape recorders, reel-to-reel tape recorders and cassette recorders, and start experimenting with just working by myself. So around that time, sort of 78, I go into a lot of interesting underground clubs, I suppose. I don't know if that still exists anymore because everything is so accessible, but in those days it was a lot of word of mouth, and so you go to meet interesting gigs, you know, bands like Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire, This Heat, Scritti Politti, Wire. And before these shows, they would play some great music, you know, and we didn't have Shazam, of course, in those days, so, but you would hear these songs, you'd be like, I recognise this, I heard this at a show I went to last week. And one particular song that used to haunt me and my old brother Andrew, who would often come with me and our friends, was Private Plane. I didn't know what it was called for a while. I'd be like, wow, this track is so haunting and mysterious. And I had to find out more about it. And eventually, you know, asked around, people said, oh, it's this mysterious guy called Thomas Leer. And then, of course, bought a copy. I think it was International was on the flip side. And absolutely fell in love with it. And then found out more about Thomas, that he was essentially a one-man band, a guy really in his bedroom, just made this record, put it out on his own label. And it was so inspirational because I've mentioned this before, but he really represented the punk ethos to me. Punk, yeah, apart from the Pistols and the Clash, but the rest of it I could sort of leave it alone because they were all so derivative, copying each other, the way they dressed, the music they made. But the post-punk era was fascinating to me because you had all these incredibly creative people, but all doing different things, yet somehow, you know, at the time it wasn't particularly known as a group, and the post-punk term has been sort of applied retrospectively. But that handful of people, Thomas, as I mentioned, Throbbing Gristle, Wire, Cabaret Voltaire, This Heat, Scritti Politti, and others, Robert Rental, of course, the collaborator, and Daniel Miller, the Normal, were a huge inspiration because suddenly I thought, I don't even need a band. You know, I was already going in the direction of playing around with tape recorders because of what I was learning at the Wolf Recording Studios. And suddenly this thought of, well, you just make these records in your bedroom, you put them out yourself. It was so liberating. It was absolutely liberating. And so I do credit, you know, out of all of them, really sort of Thomas, because he was a one-man band. And then the more I found out about it, I found it very fascinating because the reason the vocals were so hushed, because he didn't want to wake Liz, his partner, up. He was crouched in the bedroom. And that added to the intrigue. And also the album, the bridge that he did with Robert Rental, there were clicks and noises on it. I think it was the refrigerators going on and off. So all of a sudden these imperfections and accidents became a crucial part of the creative process. You know, just whatever was happening and whatever compromises possibly had to be made on the way then became an inherent part of the creative process. So that was exciting, and that also represented the punk ethos. cheap equipment, just having the courage to just do it yourself and express yourself.
You actually obviously worked with Thomas, and can you tell us a bit about how that came about?
Well, I first met Thomas through my keyboard player at the time, Keith Laws, because Keith was quite friendly with Thomas's partner at the time, Liz. I think she was working at Virgin Megastore, and so I met Liz and we all got quite friendly, and then I think Keith suggested it'd be nice to sort of meet with Thomas. So I think I met him around then, although I knew he was very reclusive and mysterious and didn't really particularly like meeting people. But we obviously got along. I liked him. But the first time we actually did work together, I did this series of this residency at the Marquee Club, which was, I think it was 1982, 81, 82. By that stage, I'd released a single and an album on 4AD, and also a single on Some Bizarre, and I'd recently signed to CBS. And I think I was just about to release the first or the second single on CBS, I can't remember now, but I decided to put together 2 supergroups for this Marquee residency, underground supergroups. So some of my favourite people and friends. So I had J.G. Thirlwell, Fetus, played. I had Thomas, Kid Montana from Belgium, Mark Armand, Zeke Manyika from Orange Juice. We had Mal from Cabaret Voltaire, Simon Fisher-Turner, Colin Lloyd Tucker, Peter Ashworth, who was my drummer at the time. I think Edwin Collins may have stood in as well, actually. And I divided the groups up into aggressive and mellow, I believe, initially, for large parts of the set. And so I think, obviously, Fetus was in the aggressive one. We literally even had a kitchen sink on stage. And we had, just guitars that were all tuned to E, probably, cranked up, tape loops running. I think Thomas was in the mellow band, along with Simon Fisher-Turner, Kid Montana, possibly. And then at the end, we all came on stage together. But it went very well. A bit windy out here. But the shows went very well. Packed every week. A great atmosphere. Except on the very last show, we would do this performance at the end of every show, where I think I'm not sure if we put on balaclavas. We're all dressed in black. May have worn balaclavas. 9 or 10 of us playing guitar in a row at the front, hammering away, and we would do that after every show. But on the last show, some idiots in the audience started to throw glasses at us and stuff, and a big fight ensued between us and we started fighting with the wrong people, because it transpired that it was people at the back of the audience throwing, but the lights were in their face so we couldn't see. So we started punching and kicking. But everyone ran off, and there was only 2 people left fighting beside me with the audience. And people are often surprised to find out who they were. Well, they're not surprised about the first one. It's Jim Thirlwell was there. The second one was Mark Armand. Ferocious. Tom ran off with the rest of them. And Mark, very impressed, he took his guitar off, was like swinging it, and it was awful, really, because backstage afterwards, a guy came back, like blood pouring from his head. And Mark was so apologetic, because he had a terrible temper, and was like profusely apologetic. But that was a lingering memory, and it was a shame, really, because we had a fight with the wrong people. And then we found out there were some idiots at the back. But it was very dramatic, those shows. So that's the first time I worked with Tom, and it was great fun.
How was he getting him to come on stage at all? Because
yeah, it was. I remember, actually, Tom had a bit of a sort of existential, what can I say, an existential anxiety attack during the rehearsals, where he got quite down on himself because of his piano playing. I think he felt, you know, I mean, to be honest, none of us were very good musicians. It was really the ideas. And I think Tom felt he wasn't expressing, he'd not been in that sort of situation, I think, and all of a sudden he'd felt he wasn't doing himself justice, and he had a wobble, a bit of a sort of existential angst during one of the rehearsals, but he got over that, and I think he really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. So that was the first time I worked with him, and then the next time, the more famous time, was on the album Soul Mining, whereby some of the people that I worked with on the Marquee shows, notably Thomas, Zeke, and Jim, featured on Soul Mining and made, you know, wonderful contributions. Jim's was more of a cameo. He played percussion on Giant and used the name alias Frank Want. Jim's always had loads of aliases for some reason. Zeke's contribution was wonderful because he played drums on a couple of tracks, but also the chanting at the end of Giant, the beautiful African chant. It was really helped make that track a sort of epic track. And Thomas's contributions were absolutely beautiful. And he had a way of playing the synthesizer. I mentioned this in the liner notes on Soul Mining. I remember when we were recording in the Garden Studios, which was John Fox's studio at the time, which I later purchased. And I loved that studio. And Thomas came in to do his recording, and we hired in some synthesizers, and Tom was just like, nah. So what's wrong? He went, no, that's got a pitch wheel. I only played with a pitch lever. It was stuck in my mind because, and he's absolutely right, but the pitch wheel, I think it was on the Roland synthesizers that he used to like, because they were lightly sprung, so it enabled him to develop this very, very fluid and fast style, and it almost sounded like an Oriental instrument, particularly if you listen to it on the Twilight Hour. You know, you hear this, and people think, what is that instrument? How is he doing that? Because he tried it with the pitch wheel. He just said, look, it's too heavy, it's too cumbersome, and it really cramped his style. And that always stuck in my mind, actually, how that was such a part of his, you know, I'd never known anybody before or since really use the pitch lever like that. And also the solo on Waiting for Tomorrow, which was like a guitar solo, beautiful solo, you know, and very sort of quick. And so those feelings of, as I said, existential anxiety he may have had about himself working with other people was quickly dispelled, I think, during Soul Mining, because he made such a vital contribution to that album. And I was just very pleased to have him on the album. You know, again, it was paying homage, reference to my roots as well. So it was very, very important to me. And the most recent time we've collaborated, although it's not a sort of traditional collaboration, but he's recorded one of my songs, which features on this upcoming triple album, which is going to be released, which is connected to this project here, Radio Cineola Trilogy. But he has recorded a fantastic cover version of a song of mine, Weather Bell, which was from my Naked Self album. And it's absolutely beautiful what he's done. So that's going to be released in October as part of this triple album. And this project, it's a very big multimedia sort of sprawling project in a way, but what's interesting, it's almost parts of it like a bit of a family reunion, but people playing different roles. So we've got Jim has an involvement, but he's writing the liner notes to the spoken word aspect. Zeke is playing performing some backing vocals and playing some percussion. Thomas has sung a cover version. We've got people like Anna Domino, who's sung on Sweet But the Truth. She's sung a version of the songs. Johnny Marr's back playing some guitar. We've got people outside of music, architects, poets, lighting designers, filmmakers. So it's going back to those roots that sort of post-punk experimental roots in a way, where everything is possible, bringing interesting creative people together from different disciplines and just seeing where it goes. So, and again, it's remembering, you know, my roots by bringing back some of those people that I worked with years ago.